All right, y'all, these Negritos were some of the first people to inhabit the Americas in ancient times. This is true. The indigenous people were described as so black that they looked like infernal devils. Explorers like Hernando de Soto, when he got to Florida in 1512, he started warring with the Florida Indians, who he described as big, black. We've always been here. We are the indigenous people.
All right, so check this out. Let's see if this is true. So he mentions De Soto. All right, well, we got De Soto right here. The history of Hernando de Soto in Florida between 1512 to 1560. Bernard, his ship. You guys know this, 1881. This is always a reprint, but let's get to my point. On page 87, let's see what he's talking about. Let's see if he actually says what he's talking about. All right, let's get to the point. It says here, among them, there were two kings, more beautiful in form and stature that can possibly be described. One was about 40 years old and the other about 24. The oldest had a deer skin around his body, artificially wrought in the masked figure. His head was without covering. His hair was tied back in various knots, like braids. Around his neck, he wore a long chain ornament with many stones in different colors. The young man was similar in the general appearance. This is the finest looking tribe, he says, and the handsomest in their custom that we have found in our voyage. Now, were they dark black like this guy was saying? On the contrary, mon frere, they were not like you. They exceed us in size, and they were of a very fair complexion. Hold on a second. If they were, why would they be a fair complexion? Some of them incline more to a white, not a, like this guy said, or like this guy is. By the way, CHIWIWIS is AKA Wabos. That's what it is. We're just making fun of y'all. And others of a tawny, not a. And their faces are sharp. Their hair long and black, not woolly like a. Now, check this out, and it gets even better. Okay, it gets even better. Okay, their women are of the same form, beauty and graceful and fine countenance, and pleasing appearance in the manner and modesty. They wear no clothing except of deerskin ornaments like those worn by men. Okay, some wear very rich link skin upon their arms and various ornaments upon their head, composed of braids of their hair, which also hang down upon their breasts on each side. Now, I've never, in my experience of, unless you're mixed with white people, you guys don't have that. Now, this is something very interesting that I think you brothers and sisters need to really understand. There is something to this. Others wear different ornaments, such as women in Egypt and Syria use. Now, here's my question to you, Wabos, or it says here that a lot of us wore several pieces of copper, okay? Now, the reason I'm saying this is because if we are very familiar with copper ornaments that were not uncommon in Indians, why the hell didn't they just say, if we were wearing copper, that our skin was like copper? CHIWIWIS. Y'all are wrong, bro. Y'all are wrong. But let's continue. I still got more to show.
Imagine like a white European coming here, of course, without knowing that they were in a completely new land that has not been found by anybody but Native Americans, and seeing people with dark skin, in times when you can't take a picture with your phone, like even like the people who came here, the Europeans who came here, were people who were illiterate or people who were like looking for fortune. It's not that they brought like artists or they brought like any. So they did their best when they went back home to describe what they saw, and it was like people with dark. Of course, if I go back to my country, spend a couple of weeks there, like I have dark skin, and not just that. Like when I tell the story that my father used to call me negro because I was the one in the family with the darker skin. He used to call my mom negra. And in this case, in my country, it's not an insult. It's just it's more like, well, you have dark skin, you're a negro, or you're a moreno, or you're a negra, or negrito. So that's a thing in Spanish that happens. And sometimes these people who are wishful thinking, they find the word negro hidden there, and they think that it refers to Africans, when it's just a thing in Spanish that we use the word negro.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man. You make a valid point. It's a very valid point, because a lot of times we don't even take that in consideration, what he's mentioning. Why do I say this? Let me present to you this book, The Indigenous People of the Caribbean, edited by Samuel Williams. Why is this important? Because in this book on page 12, he actually speaks on that. Check this out. Page 12, the colonizers in their eagerness to impulse their religion to obtain the greatest possible profits were far more scrupulous in their treatment of the native. Indeed, their cruelty hastened by the disintegration of the native culture and their eventual annihilation. Okay? So we're talking about 1510. 1510. This is my point. Let's continue and skip. To reconstruct the Aboriginal culture, we must rely chiefly on writings about the Antillean people, our gente, produced by men, like the brother said, who lived with them and observed their culture before these people underwent the great changes. What wobbles are technically using at this point, what we call, they want to use current material to justify the means. These writers of the 16th century were principally explorers. Think about that. Explorers. So like if you're a mechanic, you're not looking into writing stuff down, practicing detail, how to take notes. You don't do that. Missionaries and colonizers. And they were hardly trained in ethnographic observations. So therefore, like he says, but before we judge their lack of ethnographic skill too harshly, we should remember that to them, ethnography was purely secondary to the central purpose of narrating the feats of the conquistadors and the condemning of the heresy of the natives. We should also keep in mind that they lived in a period of superstition and religious prejudice, and that for the past 5 centuries, their country had been engaged in a religious war against the Moors. Remember that story, and I've always shared that with y'all. This is why that shit is not fake. If we pay close attention to the historical context and the situation prevailing in Spain during this period, we can interpret their writings more accurately, which is why you got to go back and read about the destruction of the Granadas. Now, this is why it is important, again, in the same book. Now it makes sense why, and you know what? It just confirms what I always said. Columbus must have known, because you had treaties with the Spaniards and the Portuguese. So what did Columbus say? This is what you wobbles, I'm sorry, hold on. Don't get to understand. And now you must come to the conclusion. Some people say that Columbus had great racial prejudice because he attributed such importance to the skin color of the Indians. Supposedly. But then why was he keen on the differentiating between the two? Us and the fake ones. They forgot that Columbus wanted to make clear the fact that the Indians were not black, like as in African. Because if they were black as in African, it meant that he was actually in Africa. And Africa, according to the treaties with the Vatican, keep this in mind, belonged to the Portugals, or belonged to Portugal. Thus, the alleged racial prejudice of his description was really a way of him proving that he was not in Africa. Okay, so get the fuck that puto. Get out of here with that shit, bro. But indeed had reached the Indies he had set out for. Man, come on, bro.
Biological anthropologists like myself spend our lives studying how humans evolved and why we differ from one another physically. Our skin provides one of the most visible markers of human variability. Using measured skin colors and environmental data, it showed UV intensity does indeed predict skin color. Wherever UV is strong, skin is dark, like it is near the equator or at high altitude. At the poles, the skin of indigenous people is almost always lighter. That suggests that variation in human skin melanin production arose as different populations adapted biologically to different solar conditions around the world. The thing is, where once human migrations took many generations, we now move about the planet at the speed of sound. That means increasing numbers of us have pigmentation that's not a good match with where we live.
People with fair skin and red hair, your phenotype is telling you you have a high risk of skin cancer if you're out in the sun. If you're a dark-skinned individual, living, for example, in Scandinavia or in Minnesota, you're not going to have optimal exposure to UV for optimal vitamin D synthesis, and you need to take supplements.
We now know that we need to make cultural adaptations like these to stay healthy, but that's not all we've learned. With the knowledge we now have about evolution, we also know that skin color is a flexible trait that has changed through time as various groups of people moved to sunny or less sunny parts of the world. And we know that skin color is inherited independently of other traits and is not associated with other aspects of a person's appearance or behavior.
Present day DNA, where we have mitochondrial DNA, we have, peer-reviewed science studies. You will never find a peer-reviewed study that holds any water in any Afrocentric or Abocentric based study.
When it comes to contemporary white archaeologists, they're like, oh no, that's the white man's science and this and that. But when it comes to these like 19 or 1700 white dudes who never set foot on the Americas, when they draw a picture of this,
that's different. Yeah.
When they draw a picture of Moctezuma and he has these cherubic features, and yet colored with dark skin, all of a sudden these are the guys we should believe, not the guys that actually use genetics.
Book in 1907. We're going to get into specifics as to what these people look like, what our gente look like, right? Or Taino brothers. What's up, Guaracuya? So let's get to it. Let's get to it, okay? And then and that's why you have to understand in this explanation of the Caribs and Spaniards, you're going to hear another word. Why is this important? Because these stupid ass really don't read. And I want you to read. Don't be like them. What is this? On several maps of Puerto Rico, we find the name Carib Mountains, affixed to sierras in the east of the islands. This, like other place names such as Guarabo, is a Carib variation. Now you're going to see a lot of Carib here. Points to the Carib influence. Puerto Rican women whom the Carib took prisoners and made slaves had children of mixed Taina and Carib blood. So you're like, what's going on? So Wabos are like probably licking their chops right now, right? Just to continue. The two peoples were not continually hostile. Were not continually hostile. The Carib aided the Borinqueño in the Battle of Yuaco River. In fact, a fact which would suggest kinship. There is no indication in early accounts of the Carib Villacas assimilated with the Western Providence. Okay? Although they were Spanish settlers there. So now we hear Spaniards. Tainos, Caribs, and Spaniards now in Puerto Rico, right? So we can regarding the extent of prehistoric raids on Puerto Rico, but made judge of their frequency by the reference of Carib attacks after the Spaniards had settled in the island. Here's why Christopher Columbus knew he wasn't in Africa. And here's why you must understand that you are not of this Americas. You were brought here, or you came with the Spaniards conquering as well. And that's probably why you have the same spirit to this day. In 1520, according to the letter from Baltasar de Castro, 5 canoes of Carib, pay attention, with 150 men of Carib, 150 men Carib, meaning our gente here, landed at the mouth of the Humacao at the eastern end of the island, burned houses, and killed several men, Spaniards and natives, because, they were at war. We understand. But check this out. In 1529, on the 18th of December, in the middle of the night, 8 great canoes of Carib entered the bay or harbor of San Juan, where they killed 3 Negroes. And caused great fear. In 1530, they made a descent of 500 men. And check this out. On the eastern end of the island, capturing and killing several men, women, and carrying off 25 Negroes who it is supposed were afterwards eaten. What exactly does that mean? Now, I don't know about the eating part. Like eating. Yeah, for real? Okay. Well, let's continue. Then it says here on the next page, okay? It talks about how they and what they look like. Here it says their teeth bad, skulls, their birth. They had long hair, thick black horse. Now, let's continue. Again, these islanders, Haitians, not like, the BHIs that say those Haitians are the people. No. Those are Africans, okay? Were of medium height, but well-shapen. Their color reddish, their face gloss hideous. Nostrils very open. The head long, but absent on the rest of the body. Dirty and black, their teeth were. The color of their skin was partly due to the constant application of pigment and the heat of the sun, which is the video that we just watched, to which their naked bodies were always exposed. They flattened their heads by art, thus reducing the size of their foreheads, which pleased them greatly. I've never seen y'all do that. To this, their mothers took care of to hold them tightly pressed between their hands and between the two little boards, which by degrees flattened the head, whereby the skulls hardened and molded shape. Interesting, isn't it, right? Francisco Damara, he says that the natives have a chestnut color and are less stature than the Spaniards, and had narrow foreheads made of are so artificial by pressure on the sides of the head so that their eyes protrude. The nostrils are wide, the white of their eyes somewhat pronounced. They have no beard, and their bodies, for the most part, are hairless. They have straight black hair, fine and well cared for. Fine is not woolly like this. Is straight black, straight hair, beautiful, but do not have good teeth. Now, again, we're looking at the phenotype, right? So again, that's why it's important, and you need to understand that when somebody tries to tell you something that they don't know about, well, the only way they can prove you wrong or prove themselves right is if you don't read and you don't prove them wrong. Let's go to the bottom of this. Check this out real quick and then move on. Their mouths are not very large. Their teeth are perfectly white and close. True, it is. Their complexion is of an olive color naturally. Their foreheads and noses are flat, not naturally, but by artifice. Do you see what we're going with here? We don't see what you see, but
about the experiences of indigenous people, past and present. Our next guest is one native voice who's challenging some of the foundational stories we tell about this country. In his recently launched book, An Afro-Indigenous History of the United States, Dr. Kyle T. Mays, who is Saginaw Anishinaabe, examines both the enslavement of Africans and native dispossession, revealing how the two were deeply intertwined. It's an incredible book, and honestly, it's one of the first to offer simultaneous accounts of Black and indigenous resistance on these lands.
And, you know, you have even today, Hoteps, if you will, who claim that there are the original peoples. And we have to dispel that myth because it's dangerous rhetoric that erases indigenous peoples.
Say a little bit more about that. When you say that, and I don't particularly use the term Hotep, but you're saying that there are pockets of thought that would suggest that African people or Black people are the original people. And are you saying that it's inadequate as an analysis because we should say that there are multiple original peoples, or are you saying that Black people aren't the original people and that indigenous people are? I'm just trying to clarify for the audience.
Right. So there's a segment, especially through social media, and I've been attacked and been claimed to be a part of the Copper tribe. I have no idea what that is. And they say that Black people are the original peoples of the U.S. With no historical documentation.
Gotcha.
And it ignores Native peoples' histories of, you know, how long they've been here, right? Creation stories. And it's just a dangerous thing that perpetuates the erasure of Native peoples, which is central to American history and popular culture.
all right, I appreciate what the brothers is doing. Thank you very much, man, for keeping it real. Even though you physically don't look like me, your spirit says a lot about that. You are our people because you know what's going on. So let me introduce you guys to this book here, the Crania Americana. Okay, very good book, written in 1839 by Samuel Morton, who these love to use, but not this book. Crania Americana, or the comparative view of the skulls of various Aboriginal nations of the North and South America. Now, they called him that he was part of the what again? He was part of the copper-colored tribe, right? The hell does that even mean? He even like, what the hell? The dude even laughed. The other guy laughed, right? Well, that's an excellent point, and I'm glad he brought that up because we're going to tackle this thing. This is a hot topic with these. And I always tell them, man, if you don't know history, shut up. So let us who know educate y'all a little bit. A copper-colored skin, page 68, has been assumed by most writers as a characteristic distinction of the Americans, meaning the nativos here, indigenous, who have hence been called the copper-colored race. The investigation of Dr. McCullough satisfactorily proved that this designation of a copper-colored race is wholly incapable, meaning not possible, to the Americans as a race here. Why? Because as we know, and this is reading me separate apart, there's a variation of fair skin, dark skin, red skin, brown skin, tawny skin, olive skin. and that is more characteristic of some other and very remote nations, meaning that copper color applies to some other nations from afar, like exactly. So you that don't know, the error has obviously arisen from the habitual use among many tribes of red paint and brown skin, which occasions a copper hue. So we're talking about something of a construct. This is not natural. Humboldt declares that the denomination of the copper-colored men could never, you hear that? Never have originated in the equinoctial regions to designate the Americans, meaning the indígenas de aquí, cabrones. And I could further testify that among the individuals of many different tribes that have come under my observation, meaning he's seen them, I have never seen a copper-colored man. What the hell? So I got a question for you. You hold on to this copper color thing, but yet in 1839, he's literally telling you it doesn't even apply to us. Anyways, let's continue. He says, I have never seen copper colored man. We consider, therefore, says Dr. McCullough, that the color of the American Indian in general is brown and differing in intensity with various tribes according to the various localities. But it is almost impossible to say that what that brown color principally resembles, like the video before regarding the variety of skin tones, depending on where you live, locality, and the sun, and how you cover or uncover yourself. The cinnamon is, in my apprehension, the nearest approach to it, still, though too inaccurate for general comparisons. I fully coincide, in my opinion, with Dr. McCullough and believe with him that no epithet derivable from the color of skin so accurately designates the American collectively as that of a brown race. Man, oh man, that must hurt.
Indigenous Afro-American DNA is haplogroup R1. In this video, we will talk about genetics. Afro-Americans are indigenous to North America. We are indigenous because our ancestors were Black Native Americans, Black Europeans, and Sub-Saharan Africans. Most geneticists claim that Afro-Americans are not Native Americans because they say we don't carry Native American genes. This is a lie, because Mongoloid Native Americans and Afro-Americans carry genes that originate in Africa and are still carried by Africans today.
But we have not detected any African-like populations in the New World, to my knowledge. And African populations are very, very genetically distinct.
All right, so now hopefully you you CHIWIWIS can finally get it. An inquiry into the distinctive characteristics of the aboriginal races of America. Same writer, Samuel Morton. Okay, 1844. Colombianos love to read this. And so do every other stupid ass wobble. But anyways, here's my point. Okay, now you're going to understand why he says it's so distinctive. Like, there's no African bloodline here. And it's just so undivinely, meaning it's so consistent. And in this case, we're going to see now what it means. Because they don't know how to read. It says here, I cannot but question the physical diversities do occur. This is page 5 of the same book. And do occur, equally singular and inexplicable, as seen in different shades of color, varying from a faint tint to a complexion almost black. And this too under circumstances in which climate can have little or no influence, meaning that in some cases you may live up in the north and you can still be dark skinned, which is true. So also in reference to the stature, the difference is remarkable in the entire tribes, moreover, geographically proximate to each other. So here it's saying that yes, we're a variety of color, we're a variety of shapes. This fact, however, are mere exceptions to the general rule and do not alter the peculiar physiognomy of the Indian, meaning the way we look. So we may be darker, lighter, taller, or shorter, but the way we look, our features don't change, which is undeviantly or undeviantly, meaning like it doesn't change from it, like undeviating, like it doesn't like move from it. It's consistent, which is consistent, so to speak, characteristic as that of the Negro, because when you see one Negro, whether light, dark, black, brown, fat, skinny, they all look Negro. For whether we see him in the Atlantic cherub and the stunted chima. Now, the cherubs, didn't we just read a book earlier that talked about the cherubs, and then there was cherubs, Spaniards, and then how they captured 25 Negroes? There's a difference here, right? Of course. But here we see why they get confused by this. So when you see a native like us, you know that's a native. When you see a Negro, no matter what color, you know that's a Negro. That's hard to understand, but it's easy to comprehend if you just...
The separation between African populations and non-African populations occurred anywhere between 60 to 200,000 years ago, depending on the African population that you are, thinking of. So, for example, West Africans, the most likely donor population in the New World, and the donor population to the African diaspora in the New World, diverged from Eurasians on the order of 60 to 100,000 years ago. And so they show up when they show up in the ancient DNA. They're very clear. They're very distinct. And to my knowledge, we don't see any of this in the New World samples before 1492.
We found that there were 5 primary mitochondrial DNA lineages present. These lineages have become designated by letter names in the scientific world. And the ones that we see in Native American populations were the mitochondrial lineages A, B, C, D, and X. And these 5 lineages are ones that are common today in Native Americans, and they were the ones that were present in these ancient communities. Were the mitochondrial lineages A, B, C, D, and X. Were the mitochondrial lineages A, B, C, D, and X.
All right, family, so let's finish it off. Same book. We're going to go back to this real quick. Check this out. Same book here, Crania Americana, or A Comparative View. Same writer, Samuel Morton, right? He is debunking Wobble crap. And Wobbles love to bring him up, but they just don't read his book. So we're going to go to page 67. And this is, I think it should seal the deal. Then again, you know what I mean? Nobody can say that because these guys don't listen. But let's find out. Did we have people that looked like with woolly hair and all that shit, right? Let's find out. Page 67. The long black lank hair is common to all the American tribes, among whom no trace of the frizzled locks of the Polynesians or the woolly texture of the Negro has ever been observed. Just no different in copper color. Don't apply to us, but it applies to darkies like you. The beard is very deficient among the American generally, and the little that nature gives them, they assiduously eradicate from their early manhood. From an early manhood, it is perhaps with respect that we observe the nearest analogy between the American and Mongols. This is where they get the comparable, right? Because they can't grow hair. It's not that we don't grow hair. We just plucked it out. Although it is far from being peculiar to them alone, it is not, however, as DePaul asserts, that the beard is wholly wanting. For travelers have occasionally noticed it long and full where it has been allowed for natural growth. Examples of this kind have been particularly observed upon the Chippewyans and the slaves in the Dog Rib Indians of the far north. Lewis and Clark remarked that the beard among the Chupanush west of the Rocky Mountains are very often suffered to grow, nor does it appear to be a natural deficiency in that respect. For we observe several men who, if they had adopted the practice of shaving, would have been as well supplied as ourselves. Leperoux observed good beards in about 1/2 of the Indians in New California, and the rest have probably eradicated theirs by art. And Molina says that the Chileans occasionally have a thick beard as the Spaniards. Holy moly. That's gonna hurt. That's gonna hurt. The mustaches which modern travelers have found among the inhabitants of the northwest of America are, says Humboldt, are such more curious as celebrated naturalists have left the question underdetermined whether the Americans have naturally no beard or no hairs on the rest of their bodies, or whether they pluck them out care. Here's a little extra one so you could take it to go, okay? If Rodrigo Bastida saw the Indians he enslaved as Loro or Negro in 1497 because the contract determined that that's how he should see them, Amerigo Vespucci identified the indigenous people of Paraya, Venezuela, as having a reddish cast to their flesh like that of lions with flattened faces, similar to those of the Tartars. Now, again, keep this in mind, that copper color is not like lion's flesh or lion's fur